We're back on. Okay. We might have some trouble with our connection. Again, I'm Sabrina Walker Hernandez, been with the nonprofit industry for 25 years. This is Rocio. She's a grant writer guru, and we're very happy to have her with us this morning. If you're on, if you can let me know if I have a shadow on my face, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, before we get started, I want Rocio to tell us a little bit about herself, and I want you guys to stay on to the end because we have some exciting news to share. So, Rocio, tell me a little about yourself as a grant writer.
Sure, as a grant writer?
As a grant writer.
So, my name is Rocio Mata. I've been doing grant writing for about 19 years, but exclusively only grant writing. I've been doing that for about 8 years.
Okay.
I kind of started doing that when Matthew was born, who's now 8. I kind of went home and I was like, okay, what do I do from home? And I kind of just started practicing and doing that. So I've been doing that with that. I've worked for a lot of agencies. I've done a lot of work in child welfare,
Okay.
A lot of work at the Literacy Center for a bit. I've worked with some municipalities,
Okay.
but most of my work has been with Boys and Girls Clubs.
Okay.
Most recently, the majority of that work has been here in Hidalgo County with the different Boys and Girls Clubs and just kind of helping them expand their capacity in reaching families and going beyond just youth.
Okay, great. So I got a couple of questions here for Rocio. I have about 8 questions. We're going to try to stay on our timeline, although I do like to talk, and Rocio is one of the people that I actually like to talk to, so I'm going to keep myself on task.
Am I
okay?
not your first woman that you've had on here?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so that's might make things a lot different dynamics here.
Different dynamics, so hopefully we'll stay on the time frame. So what is your grant writing success rate?
Okay, well, my success rate is pretty high.
Okay.
I know that would give me a reason to be really, confident. It's really high.
Okay.
It's about 90 to 95%. Until recently, it was actually 100% this year, but
Who turned you down?
now, although this hasn't always been the case, but nowadays it really is the case. But it's not so much that I'm good, although I do think I'm pretty good at what I do.
Okay.
It's just the fitness. Like, I make sure that what I apply for, I'm really aligned to.
Okay.
So that, I will not have that, turn away.
Okay.
So it's really that once I know that I've committed, because it's my commitment too. Once I commit to an application process, then the likelihood of me getting it is very high because I've already did a lot of the research.
Okay. So that's how you decide which grants to apply for?
So the way I decide what I apply for is research.
Okay.
You research the funder. You research the RFP, which is the request for proposal. So before you even apply, they send out this RFP, and they're requesting proposals from you. Their intent is to give money. If they're requesting this, their intent is we want to give money.
Right.
So you kind of have to read there and really understand where they're coming from, understand the funder, understand their intent. The funder in itself, the funder is a person or agency or foundation that they want to give this money away. So if you do that research and say, and then another thing is look at who they funded.
Okay.
Look at how much they funded. Look at how many awards they're giving.
Okay.
If it's this national search and they're asking for proposals and they're going to give out 2 grants, the likelihood of me applying is really, I'm not going to waste that time unless I have a lot of time.
Okay.
But if it's something that, the only time that I will apply for that
Okay.
is when it's something that really fits. So for example, if it's for border issues and they're giving only 2 awards in the whole nation.
Yes.
But we're along the border.
Right.
Okay, so I will apply for that.
Okay.
So because I do all of that work before, by the time I apply, it's more than likely going to be awarded.
Okay, so it's a good thing to research and know what you're going in for. Okay, so what does an organization have to have in place to be eligible for a grant?
So that's a good question. So I don't know so much eligible, but
Okay.
really you should not be applying unless you have these things. So one is financial readiness.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you have to make a lot of money. That means that you have to be financially ready, meaning you should have a budget that makes sense.
Okay.
So if you have a budget and your CEO is making $100,000 and you're only, making $120,000, that doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Because someone's going to look at that. But you have a whole team. Foundations and funders have a whole team that's going to look at your finances and they're going to say, okay, well, that doesn't make sense.
Okay.
So you have to have financial readiness, a budget, annual, if not preferably quarterly reviews of that.
Okay.
So somehow that has to be reviewed and you have to be able to prove that that's being reviewed.
Okay.
So, and then checks and balances.
Okay.
So how do you submit, how do you make purchases? How is that recorded? Whether that is QuickBooks, which is super easy to use. I mean, not really, but compared to the other systems, yes, QuickBooks is pretty easy. So you got to make sure those things are in place. So at the beginning, when you're first starting a nonprofit, all those things that you think no one's looking at, make sure those things are in place, and you will save yourself so much time, because you can't come and say, hey, write me this grant.
Right.
Because I can't do anything with that.
Right.
I have to sit there and I have, fix all that first, which is fine. I don't mind. That's the work that I do. But then you're like, okay, well, what are you working on? And I'm, trying to tell you. So I would say that's the first thing. The second thing is someone committed to compliance. Okay. Whether that doesn't have to be a compliance officer, whether that be the CEO, whether that's a very good receptionist, whether that's a program director, just somebody has to be committed to that compliance. And by compliance is basically who's going to turn in the reports, who's going to make sure the deliverables are executed, who's going to make sure you're being able to measure that, what's your pre and post measures and things like that. So that person. The other is supportive leadership. Okay. Whether that's your CEO or your board of directors, you are not, as a grant writer, you're not responsible for that grant. Right. But sometimes,
for the implementation of the grant.
Right, but sometimes it feels that way because you have that. But so somebody has to be supportive, especially your board of directors or your CEO has to say, okay, you know what, I understand what you committed to. Okay. So, because at the end of the day, it's a commitment between the grant writer and, it should be a commitment between the agency and the funder. Okay. But in many ways, and nowadays, it's also a commitment between the grant writer and the funder. And I tell you that because when it comes to public relations, if you make a good relationship with the funder, right, that's going to be continuous funding. So it really, really benefits you. And then the last thing I would say, a strategic plan. Okay. Formal or informal. Just strategic vision, strategic direction. Okay. We know where we're heading. This is all aligning. It's coming together. Okay. So you can have that as an organization. Those 4 things, I think you'll be ready for a grant. If you don't have them, it would really, benefit you to really hire a grant writer or hire someone or get someone or work on these things that you think are like, okay, well, this is not making me money. But yes, in the long run, these things, you can't even apply for grants without this.
Right. So you need a good infrastructure of financials, compliance, support, whether it be board or CEO, and then the last piece is strategic plan. Yeah. And you say a strategic vision. And I always say a strategic plan needs to be written, and you need to be following it. It shouldn't be sitting on the shelf. So that's good. So those are the things that you need to have in place. If you're just joining us, thank you so very much for joining us. If you can hit a like or a wow or give me a thumbs up, that would be great. Help us with our algorithms. I see you out there, Laretha K. Laws. Thank you for joining us.
Laretha.
Hi. I hope you're having a great day today. I'm sorry, I'm blind, so I can't see all the names. I see Stephanie Leal. Thank you for joining us. So we got a couple of more questions for Rocio. What are the pros and cons of government grants?
Okay, so with government grants, the really, really cool and the big pro is the fact that they have lots of money. Right. So when they do something, it's something that's when they do an RFP or RFA, it's because they've already had money that's been allocated, federally allocated for this. So it's usually a lot of money. Right. And 2 is they have to give it to you, because this money is taxpayers' money. Right. It has to be given.
That's true. I never looked at it like that.
And 3, more than likely, not always, more than likely, it has to be spread out. Okay. So your ability to get it is pretty high in that. Okay. Right? But when it comes to federal grants, it's kind of federal. So you're really competing against municipalities, whether that be states, whether that be counties. So if I was a nonprofit, I really would not dabble in federal grants unless you have a very big coalition of organizations that are working. So the only reason I would even consider federal grants is because of our location. Okay. So sometimes because we're in the valley, maybe a lot of that money doesn't get trickled down here. Yeah. So that would be the reason why I would even consider it. Okay. So, but when it comes to government grants, I would consider more state grants. Okay. Again, that money doesn't get usually trickled down to the valley, and that's supposed to be spread out evenly, so your success rates are a lot higher and that type of thing. Those are the pros. Okay. The cons of government grants is, of course, compliance. They have compliance teams that are hired to check your compliance. Yeah, just stay on your grant. Right. Yeah. So they're going to look at every piece of paper you submit. They're going to look at every expense. They're going to look at everything. So especially if you're an organization that doesn't have those 4 things that we talked about in place, right, you really need to consider, if you really want that. It's a lot of work for that money. Right. The other thing about the federal grants is that they're very competitive. Sometimes they might again be giving out 2 grants or 3 grants. And it's a lot of work. Right. When I submit state grants or federal grants, they're just books,
right.
boxes. People that have been working with me know that I go crazy and I'm like, putting together, and it's like 6 applications, 6 it's just a lot of work.
Right.
A lot of work. It's definitely worth it if it's a perfect, it perfectly aligns with what you're doing. It's worth it. It's a lot of money. So it's a great benefits,
right.
but on the you have to really be ready.
Right. You have to be ready. And just one of the things that I think that I take away from government grants, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, once you're in, you're in. You just have to take care of it.
Exactly. And I forgot, yes, it's a recurring, usually, not always, because it gets pretty scary, especially when it's a change in basically your government and things like that. But it's usually a recurring money. You take care of it. You take care of your compliance. Right. You're usually funded 3 or 4 years, 5 years for a big amount of money. Right. So for nonprofits, it's a capacity changing or growth changing type of funding. It changes you. It brings you to a different level.
Yeah, that's true. So what is the switching over from government grants to foundations, what is the best tip on building relationship with foundation funders?
You can't fake it.
Okay. What does that mean?
That means be honest and be real. No matter how hard it's hard for me to play that PR game. I know it's required as a nonprofit. I know you have to do it. I know but it's hard for me because it's a lot of, this person knows this person and this is this and that. So you can't do that with funders. Funders, at the end of the day, they're giving you their money. Right. So you have to be very real and very honest. You can, be nice to them and they might remember you, but they will only remember you if you're very passionate, if you're very honest and real and sincere. So you cannot fake that relationship. You have to really, really put it all out there and be very raw and very honest with them, and you will have great success doing that. Not negative, not always complaining and things like that, of course. You know, both, but they have to know that you're a real person. Right. It's kind of like if I come to you and I say, "Hey, Sabrina, can I have $500?" Can I?
No. You got to tell me what you need it for and all of that. And I guess it kind of depends on the relationship. Though.
That's what I was going to say.
So if you ask me for $500, I might give it to you.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's really what I wanted to hit on, the fact that maybe because it's me, I wouldn't ask you for $500 unless I needed $500. Right. And it comes with you knowing me and knowing my motives and things like that. So it's the same thing with especially with the foundation. They're taking care of their money, and it's like, okay, why should I give you $50,000, and you might be able to fake it. You might be able to get awarded once, but why would you want to get awarded once if you can be awarded multiple years? Right. If this $25,000 contribution could turn into $2 million, why would you not, work on that $2 million and have that long-term sustainability?
Okay, that makes sense. So, what's the worst mistake to make when you're writing a grant proposal? In your opinion, what's the worst mistake to make?
I think, in my opinion, is writing from your perspective versus their perspective.
Oh.
So from your perspective, a lot of organizations, if I say, what do you do for your nonprofit? You can go on and on. We all can. Right. Okay, we help children, and we are you've been taught to, and there's nothing wrong with this, to memorize these elevator speeches, which are good. But you go on and on about how awesome your organization is, how many people we serve, all these different things. When someone's trying to, maybe do family support. They want to do family empowerment programs in the community. And you're writing about, Boys and Girls Clubs, they serve this many families because we've been around for 25 years and we're part of a large movement and this and this and that, and that's great. But from their perspective, what are they trying to accomplish? They're trying to do family support, and where are they coming from? Are they coming from a mental health perspective? Are they coming from a social perspective? Like, where are they coming from? So meet them there. And you can start with, families have been, the toll of broken families has had a big impact on society. And you're kind of coming from where they're coming from, and then you're starting there. There are not very many organizations that can meet this need. We have the reach as a nonprofit organization. We touch 5,000 kids, or we serve 5,000 kids each year.
That makes sense.
And we serve, so you're kind of starting where they're at. And that's interesting because when they're reviewing, they're looking and they're like, oh, yes, we get it.
Yeah, you're great.
You're great, Girl Scouts. You're great, Boys and Girls Club. You're great. We get it. We can go on and on and pages and pages, and it's just, it's boring. Yeah. It's really what it is for them. Because they're reviewing grants. Right. So you could be amazing, but they can reviewing. And while I'm on that, so the best thing that you can possibly do also is the simplicity of it. So the clarity
Okay.
of a grant usually, which is kind of the opposite of what we think. In other words, so when I write a grant, I usually give it to my now 17-year-old son, and I said, "Hey, Robert, read this."
Okay.
And I was like, "Do you get it?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Do you get it?" I said, "Yeah." "What are the outcomes?" Okay, so he tells me what it is, and then he's like, "Yeah," and he tells me word for word what it says.
Okay.
If he gets it,
then
I've done it right.
Okay, got it.
Because sometimes we think, okay, the more elaborate, the better the speech, the better the language and all that, the better it's going to be. But if they're reviewing grants and they're reading all this, doctorate level stuff, with all this lingo, they're just tired.
Snooze.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I actually saw a study, and I had shared this in one of my trainings. So a study that showed that men, it was talking about researchers who submit grants, and men were having a lot more successful than women. It says really the vague language of men should prove more successful than women. And a lot of women took offense to that, but it's because they're just to the point, straight to it, kind of like this. Men are just like point, and they were having so much more success because they're just basic, clear, to the point.
Okay. It's kind of like when I write my blog, I try to keep it at a language at a third grade level.
Right.
Okay, and keep it simple. That makes sense. Okay, so my last question is, what do you say to those who want a guarantee in grant writing? Because that comes up a lot.
She saved it for last.
I saved it for last.
Definitely there are no guarantees. Especially two things. One is if you're a nonprofit that cannot afford a grant writer, you more than anyone need a grant writer.
Right. Because you need to get money.
Because you need to get money, but more importantly, you need to build that capacity to be able to apply for grants and continue to apply. So writing proposals is really at the end of the day a numbers game.
Okay.
There's an annual report that the Grant Station puts out. It's called the State of Grant Seekers Report. So every year they put out this thing, and it's just a bunch of nonprofits kind of talk about the application process and their rewards and all that stuff. At the end of the day, it's a numbers game. The more applications you submit, the more money you get. No matter how you look at it, if you look at the charts and all the data is there. So it's called the State of the Grant Seeking Report by Grant Station. It comes out every year. 2019's out. And you look at it, and it basically talks how many applications submitted versus how many were awarded. So you need to make sure you're submitting those grant applications. The reason why I say that is because I want to say that grants always pay off. So there is no guarantee, meaning you can hire me or someone else to write a grant. And it might not get awarded. But now you have a document that you can pull from or use to submit another one. So it's always going to pay off. If someone would be able to pay by the money they get, or get paid by the money they bring in.
Because people always try to put that in. Percentage.
I cannot tell you how many times people say, if you write me a grant, I will pay you. And it could be very lucrative for someone who has a good success rate. I can make a lot of money, But at the end of the day, one, it's not ethical, because who's going to pay for you? You're basically saying, if I get this money from this foundation and they give me this money, I'm going to give some of that money to you.
And that's not ethical.
Well, that foundation is not trying to pay for you.
They're trying to provide mental health or whatever.
Especially a percentage. So if it's 10% of $1 million, you do the math. So it's not really right. The other thing is the grant writer. If they're a good grant writer, they're going to spend a lot of time on it. They're going to do a lot of research, a lot of paperwork and all that, and they deserve to get compensated for what it is that they wrote, regardless of whether that gets awarded or not. So that's why grant writing needs to be looked at as a profession that needs to be compensated.
Well, thank you for that. Any Q&As out there? I see Jose Cruz has joined us. How are you doing? And Don Eden, I believe that's it is. Sorry guys, I am so blind. I don't know if there's any questions out there. My Vanna is sitting over there on her cell phone. I don't think there's any questions out there, but we're going to be having this in rebroadcast, so you can put your questions in the rebroadcast, and Rocio will reach out and answer those questions, or I can answer those questions. I can write grants. It's not my favorite thing to do. It is her passion, particularly government grants. Foundations I've been a little bit more successful at, but that's our time for today. And I did ask you to stay on to the end, because Rocio and I will be hosting a 2-day boot camp, and it's going to be on October the 3rd and the 4th. And right after this broadcast, the information will be available. But we kind of discussed it prior to, and we said, you know what? We'll do a drawing for one of the slots there. So if you do post a question, and we will answer that question, but you also will get put in a drawing for a slot for our workshop. It's going to be an awesome 2-day boot camp. We've already got people registered. It's limited slots, so we're excited about being able to reserve that slot. Also on September the 18th, we'll be sipping tea with Alfredo Mata Jr. Yes, relation to Rocio, her spouse. He's from the Boys and Girls Club of FAR, and we're going to be talking about how to become a great nonprofit CEO. Freddie is one of the greats, and I think he has a lot of information that he's willing to share. You can get notifications the next time that I go live if you just subscribe and hit the follow button. And you can also follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn at Supporting World Hope. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I really need you to subscribe there and get the notifications. And that is Sipping Tea with Sabrina. And we do have our mugs here, Rocio. Thank you for joining us.